beauty was served that night, and so was death. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Comment your city. I always read your words. Wolfe uncovers the polished truth. If Nero Wolfe had his way, the human race would begin its daily activities at 11 o'clock sharp, after sufficient digestion of breakfast and 2 hours of uninterrupted orchid inspection. Unfortunately, the world insists on operating at what he calls ungodly hours, which is how we came to have our morning disrupted at 9:15 by the sound of the front bell. At that time, Wolfe was midway through his second helping of shirred eggs with truffles. I had finished mine and was leaning back, considering whether to light a cigarette before or after delivering the mail. Fritz, efficient as a Swiss clock, was just returning from the kitchen with coffee when the bell rang again. Longer this time, more impatient. Wolfe's right eyebrow twitched upward. "Archie," he said, in that tone that could have frozen an open flame, "if that is a salesman, I shall require the installation of an electrified front door." "Yes, sir," I said. "Shall I ask him to step in and get his hair curled first?" I went to the door. It wasn't a salesman. It was a woman, a tall one, wrapped in a mink that had seen better winters but worse company. Her face wasn't painted for effect, just to maintain plausible composure. The kind of woman who might have been impressive if she hadn't walked all night rehearsing what to say. "Mr. Goodwin," she asked, looking past me into the hall as if she could see through to the kitchen, "I need to see Mr. Wolfe." That sentence alone would have gotten her halfway in, but the urgency in her voice did the rest. I waved her inside, hung up her coat, and steered her into the office. Wolfe naturally didn't rise. He never does. He gave her one glance over his cup and said, "Madame, the world is already too full of emergencies before breakfast. Pray do not add another unless it is compelling." She hesitated just long enough for me to notice her gloves. White kid, faint smudge near the wrist, left hand trembling slightly. She sat on the edge of the red leather chair as if it might bite. "My name is Mrs. Inez Bartlett," she began. "I was told that you, Mr. Wolfe, sometimes take cases that require discretion. This one does. Very much." "Most matters that come through that door," Wolfe said, "require discretion. That is, alas, their only virtue." He sipped. "Proceed." "It's about a plate," she said. That was good for a pause. Even Wolfe's eyelids gave the smallest flicker. I took a seat near the globe bar, ready for what would follow. "A plate of what?" I asked. "Spaghetti? Porcelain? Pearls?" Her head turned sharply. "Pearls," she said. "A plate of pearls." Now that was new. I've heard of a string of pearls, a necklace, even a tiara or two, but a plate of pearls was something fresh. She drew a breath. It was an artwork, a presentation piece made by my late husband, the jeweler Douglas Bartlett. He designed it 20 years ago, a shallow golden dish set with concentric rings of freshwater pearls. It's famous, at least in certain circles. And now it's gone. Wolfe leaned back, fingertips together. "Gone where, Mrs. Bartlett?" "That's what I want you to tell me." I could feel the temperature of the room drop half a degree. Wolfe abhors theft almost as much as he abhors unnecessary exertion. "Madam," he said, "I do not retrieve baubles. I deduce truth. Police retrieve baubles." "This isn't about theft," she said quickly. "Not exactly. The plate vanished 2 nights ago from my apartment, but it's the message that came with it that frightens me." Wolfe opened his eyes a fraction wider. "Message?" She took a folded envelope from her purse and placed it on Wolfe's desk with hands that tried not to shake. He waited until I passed it over to him, then used his letter opener to slit it neatly. Inside was a single sheet, typed. "You'll never display what you stole. The pearls belong to those who bled for them." No signature, just that. Wolfe read it once, then twice. He didn't look at her. "Archie," he said, "make a note. The typography is monospaced, perhaps Remington. paper is common bond. The phrasing? Sententious, perhaps theatrical. I scribbled, though I knew he didn't need the note. He was already filing it in that filing cabinet between his ears, where only he knows the indexing system. Mrs. Bartlett leaned forward. "I'm being watched," she said. "Someone has followed me twice this week, and yesterday morning, when I opened my jewelry safe, this was there." She handed me a small velvet pouch. Inside was a single pearl. It was cracked down the middle. I turned it over, and it glittered like a tiny moon with a scar. "All right," I said. "You've got mystery, menace, and pearls. Mr. Wolfe, are we in?" He set the note down, steepled his fingers, and stared at the ceiling as if consulting some celestial index. After a long minute, he grunted, a sound that in wolf speak could mean interest or indigestion. "I despise melodrama," he said, "but I despise theft of beauty more. Archie, we will hear her in detail at 11. Mrs. Bartlett, Fritz will bring you coffee." That was how the case of the plate of pearls began. With a woman's trembling hands, a single cracked gem, and Nero Wolfe pretending to be uninterested while already moving the pieces in his head. Fritz brought the coffee and a plate of those little almond biscuits Wolfe pretends he doesn't need and consumes with the concentration of a man diffusing a bomb. Mrs. Bartlett held the cup but didn't drink. I took the hint and left her with Wolfe long enough to get the mail and check the front stoop. Because when a woman walks in, with a cracked pearl and a typed sermon, sometimes she has a tale. The stoop was empty, but for a milk truck in retreat, and a man across the street pretending to love the scaffolding on a brownstone that hadn't needed scaffolding since Grant was president. He wore a hat low and patience high. I filed him under later. At 11 on the nose, which is the first time in history our schedule has matched another human's, Mrs. Bartlett's story arranged itself on Wolfe's desk like a tray of samples. She began with the plate. How Douglas Bartlett, jeweler and showman, had designed it for a private exhibition and then never sold it. He said the world wasn't sufficiently calm for it, she told us. He said some beauties shouldn't be tempted. That line had the dust of 20 years on it, and I could hear Wolfe's internal sneer at sentiment masquerading as judgment. "Where was it kept?" I asked. "In my apartment. An old Habersham sideboard. Customized. There's a recessed safe built into the back panel." Her voice steadied. The safe was intact. No scratches. No jimmied hinge. I opened it. Only the velvet stand remained, and the pearl you saw in the pouch had been placed on it. Wolfe's lips thinned. "Who has keys or knowledge of the mechanism?" "Keys? Only me." "Knowledge?" She counted on a gloved finger. "My husband's former apprentice, Leo Palmer, knows it exists. He helped Douglas design the compartment years ago. My stepdaughter, Claudia, she's 26, saw me open it once, and my attorney, Victor Ames. He insisted on photographing the inventory for insurance, and—" Her eyelids lowered a notch. "The gallery's curator, Vivian Ross. I promised her the plate would headline a charity preview next month." That assembled a small orchestra. Wolfe grunted. "Why bring the plate out after 2 decades of scruples?" "Money," she said, without flinching. "Douglas left the business to Leo and me. The brand is established, but cash is not. A public reappearance would inflate our next line. Vivian said donors respond to legacy." "And the note?" I said, tapping the desk. "Who thinks you stole what?" Her hands tightened. "That's what I don't understand. Leo worshipped Douglas. Claudia resented him. That's daughters and second wives. Victor is a lawyer. His blood type is retainer. Vivian, she's ambitious. But stolen. From whom?" Wolfe shut his eyes, which is not a sign of fatigue, but of interior rearrangement. "The phrasing suggests grievance with history, not commerce," he said. "A wound claims the pearl as reparation. It is nonsense in law, but potent in passion." "Mr. Wolfe," she said, voice going brittle at the edges, "if this were merely an art theft, I'd have called my insurer and taken to bed. Whoever wrote that knows me, knows what frightens me. They were in my apartment without forcing the safe. They left a broken pearl as if it were a curse. And I am being followed. That hat across the street, I asked. She gave a short nod. All week. Or someone like him. Pfui, Wolfe murmured. But it was the kind of pfui that says he's listening harder than he wants to be. Archie, you will get names, addresses, and telephone numbers. I did. Neat on a yellow sheet. Leo Palmer, shop on 47th. Claudia Bartlett, a Murray Hill address with a doorman who probably knows the net worth of every poodle on the block. Victor Ames, Madison Avenue. And Vivian Ross, Harriman Gallery, East 57th. While I wrote, the front bell went off again, urgent and prolonged. If there's a sound that gets Wolfe's bile working faster than a doorbell, I haven't heard it. I went and found a man balanced on the lip between nervous and officious. Early 40s, thick hair combed as if it were a court filing, and a tie that had never tasted gravy. He flashed a card before his name made it to his mouth. Victor Ames, he said. Mrs. Bartlett is here, isn't she? I advised her to come after I realized. Well, may I? I could have said no and seen if he melted, but the day was already crowded. I brought him back. Mrs. Bartlett didn't look surprised. Wolfe didn't look anything. Ames, she said, I didn't expect... You didn't answer your phone, he said, then realized he'd just put himself on the wrong side of Wolfe's desk and corrected tone and posture. Mr. Wolfe, I apologize for the intrusion. I represent Mrs. Bartlett on various matters. I received a call this morning from the gallery. Vivian Ross reported an anonymous letter. Do not launder history with pearls. It may be the same source. Wolfe moved his head a quarter inch toward me. Note it, he said. Ames went on, warming to his own concern. The gallery is rattled. They suggested postponement. I advised it, and I suggested to Mrs. Bartlett that if anyone could unknot this tangle without spectacle, it would be you. Mrs. Bartlett's mouth tightened in a way that said she hadn't come here on Ames's leash, but she wasn't rejecting the caller either. Mr. Wolfe, she said, if you won't take it, I need to know now. He opened his eyes fully and gave her the stare that has bilked fools and villains of the belief they're unique. I've already taken it, he said mildly. But I do not parade. I require facts delivered into this room in order, without embroidery. Ames nodded like a man receiving a benediction he'd asked for in writing. What can I provide? First, Wolfe said, the insurance records and photographs you mentioned. Second, a list of those who have handled Bartlett freshwater pearls in quantity these past 5 years, purchases, repairs, appraisals. Third, Miss Ross's letter. Archie will collect it. His gaze slid to me. You will also visit Mr. Palmer and the stepdaughter. Delighted, I said. Any preference on order? Order, he said, is an instrument, not a superstition. Go first where tongues wag and pride is easily pricked. That was Wolfe for Try the Gallery. I stood. Mrs. Bartlett rose but lingered, eyes on Wolfe as if she were trying to decide what he had already decided. There's one more thing, she said. The plate has a tiny inscription on the underside. Douglas had it engraved when he finished it. 3 words. For what's owed. He never told me who it was for. Wolfe's nostrils inflated, which in him approximates a gasp. His voice came slow. Madam, you will go home by taxi. Mr. Ames will accompany you and remain until Archie returns word. You will admit no one. You will show no concern. You will change nothing in your apartment. He shut his eyes again. We will proceed. And the man on the sidewalk? I asked. Note him, Wolfe said. Then ignore him, until he believes himself invisible. That is when he will be most careless. Mrs. Bartlett looked steadier. Ames looked useful. Wolfe looked like a mountain negotiating with gravity. I got my hat and a smile that could be mistaken for friendly if you were out of practice, and headed for the curb, where scaffolding enthusiasts spend their mornings, and a plate of pearls had rolled off its velvet into someone's idea of justice. The man across the street was still there when I came out, pretending to be absorbed by a scaffolding ledger no one had ever written. I gave him a good look, enough to make him shift his weight and glance away. I didn't bother calling him out. Wolfe's advice about invisible men is solid. They trip over their own shadows when you let them believe you're not watching. I flagged a cab, and as it pulled away, I caught a glimpse of him in the mirror, stepping forward like he wanted to be sure of where I was headed. If he followed, he'd need a faster cab or longer lungs. The gallery was on East 57th, a sleek, glass-fronted cube squeezed between two older buildings that wore their age with less shame. Inside, light bounced off steel, white walls, and the kind of silence that costs money. A young man in black regarded me with suspicion. Apparently brown suits don't pass for art critics. I told him I had an appointment with Miss Ross, which was true if you consider Wolfe's instructions binding, and he led me to a back office smelling faintly of jasmine and varnish. Vivian Ross was the kind of woman who decorates her sentences before speaking them. Tall, sharp-featured, dark hair pinned with surgical precision. She stood behind a steel desk that looked imported from the future and extended a hand like a formality she resented. "Mr. Goodwin, isn't it? Mrs. Bartlett's assistant?" "Her detective's assistant," I said. "But it sounds less elegant." She smiled the way you smile when the maitre d' forgets your reservation. "Mrs. Bartlett mentioned she was engaging Mr. Wolfe. I thought she might." She gestured for me to sit. "He's rather an institution, isn't he?" "More of a climate," I said. "You adjust to him or suffocate." Her laugh was short but genuine. "Then you'll understand that I'd prefer to keep this matter discreet. The Bartlett plate was to headline our charity preview. Now it's disappeared, and someone thinks threats typed on cheap paper will help the cause." I produced my notebook. "Tell me about the letter you received." She opened a drawer and handed over a single sheet sealed in a plastic folder. The text matched Wolfe's copy in tone and ugliness. "Do not launder history with pearls." Below, a faint fingerprint smudge, too blurred to help. I noted it anyway. "Received when?" I asked. "Yesterday morning. It came in our standard mail. No return address, just my name and the galleries. The envelope was postmarked from the city." "Any connection between you and Mrs. Bartlett outside of this event?" "I manage her late husband's pieces for the gallery. We've represented the Bartlett collection for 5 years. I've also—" She hesitated just long enough to look sincere. "Taken a personal interest in preserving Douglas Bartlett's legacy. His craftsmanship was exceptional." That personal interest landed with the weight of something rehearsed. "You ever meet him?" I asked. "Twice, years ago, before he died." "Friendly meetings?" She considered that. "He was married then, Mr. Goodwin." "Most men are," I said. "Doesn't always stop the friendly part." Her eyes cooled, but she didn't answer. I let the silence stretch. It's an old trick Wolfe uses. People hate soundless air, so they fill it with truth or noise. Vivian went with the second option. "If you think I had anything to do with this theft, you're wasting your time. The plate was insured for far more than I could gain from stealing it, and as for that letter, it's probably the work of some disgruntled collector who missed his chance to bid years ago." I flipped the page in my notebook. "Any particular collector come to mind?" She hesitated. "A few admired the plate publicly, Mr. Palmer, for instance. Douglas's apprentice. He often spoke as though the piece belonged to him in spirit. And a woman named Delora Kent. She runs a foundation in Boston. She offered to buy it 3 years ago, and Mrs. Bartlett refused." "Why?" "She said the plate wasn't for sale. She said it was private." Vivian's lip curled. "You can imagine how that plays with donors." I stood. "One last thing. Do you know a Claudia Bartlett?" "Of course. Douglas's daughter. I've met her at events. She's spirited." That sounds like the word you use before you reach for another. Vivian smiled thinly. Difficult, then. She resented her father's second marriage. Resented Inez for breathing near his work, but she wouldn't send letters. Claudia prefers her insults verbal. I thanked her and left, pocketing a photocopy of the note. Outside, the day had developed a chill wind off the park, and my tail had returned. Same hat, same patience. I led him through 2 turns, paused at a shoe shine stand, then slipped into a cab. When I looked back, he'd vanished, or decided discretion was smarter than cardio. I gave the driver Leo Parma's address on 47th. Parma's shop was a jeweler's workshop gone slightly feral. Too many tools, too much dust, and an odor of metal polish fighting with cigarette smoke. A man in his early 30s sat bent over a workbench, pale hair slicked back, magnifier perched like a monocle on a mission. He didn't look up when I came in. "Mr. Parma," I said. He grunted. "Depends who's asking." "Archie Goodwin, from Nero Wolfe's office." That made him look up. His eyes were sharp and tired, the combination you get from perfectionism under debt. "Inez sent you?" "She did." "Then you can tell her the plate was safer in my shop than it ever was in her apartment." I sat on a stool meant for smaller men. "You were the last one to handle it." "I cleaned it 3 weeks ago. It was perfect. I told her not to take it out until the show, but she wanted photographs. Now it's gone, and she thinks I stole it." "Did you?" He barked a laugh that had too much truth in it. "If I had, I wouldn't still be working 12 hours a day on engagement rings." "No, Mr. Goodwin, I wouldn't steal Douglas's work. He trusted me when nobody else did." "But you think someone else did?" He rubbed his temples. "Claudia. She hated Inez. Said the plate belonged to her father's real family, or maybe Ames. He handles too much money for a man with cheap suits." He stopped, squinting at me. "Why's Wolfe involved? This isn't his kind of thing." "Maybe not," I said, "but he doesn't like people who twist beauty for revenge." Parma frowned. "That's what this is, isn't it? Revenge." "Looks that way," I said, "and revenge leaves fingerprints." He looked away, jaw tightening. "Not if it's been waiting 20 years. When I stepped back into the street, the light had gone brittle and gray. Somewhere behind a parked sedan, a figure shifted just enough to confirm Wolfe's theory. The watcher was still there, closer now. I didn't turn. I just reached for my notebook, flipped to the first page, and wrote one word large enough to read upside down if anyone was peeking. Careless. Then I hailed another cab and told the driver to take me home, where the real movement always started behind a desk too heavy for one man but just right for Nero Wolfe. When I got back to the brownstone, Fritz was clearing away the remnants of lunch, and Wolfe was in the office, reading a German horticultural journal with the sort of scowl usually reserved for crime. He looked up as I came in, then down again, then up once more when he caught the draft I brought with me. The radiator hissed its disapproval. "You've been outdoors," he said, as though that explained the entire moral decay of modern civilization. "Only where the clues were," I told him. I dropped into the red chair and laid out my notebook. We've got ourselves a fine assortment of motives, personalities, and grudges. The only thing missing is the plate itself. He didn't speak, so I started with Vivian Ross. I gave him the whole picture. The letter twinned to Mrs. Bartlett's, the collector angle, the mention of Leo Parma and the woman in Boston, and Vivian's careful little dance around the late Douglas Bartlett's ghost. Wolfe didn't interrupt, which meant he was actually listening. When I finished, he said, "Describe her." Tall, dark, steady eyes, voice like polished glass, and the kind of smile that could convince a nun to invest in emeralds. He grunted. "Ambitious, competent, prone to resentment when recognition eludes her." That's her, all right. But she didn't seem frightened by the note. Annoyed, maybe. Nervous about bad publicity. "Then she is not the author," Wolfe said. The mind that composed those threats desires consequence, not confusion. Continue. I told him about Palmer. He leaned back, fingertips meeting in the air like two diplomats agreeing to a truce. You believe him innocent? I believe he's broke, overworked, and still talking about his dead mentor, like the man's going to walk through the door any minute. That's not guilt, that's devotion with a side of self-pity. Which may sour into grievance, Wolfe said. A dangerous alchemy. Maybe. But I think he's too proud. He talked about the plate like a relic. If he took it, he'd be showing it off in some secret shrine, not cracking pearls to scare a widow. Wolfe's eyes closed. That sound usually precedes either a breakthrough or a nap, but this time it was neither. I was followed again, I added. That opened his eyes. Describe him. Same as before. Hat, overcoat, too clean to be a drunk, too dull to be a reporter. He's good at vanishing, but not at originality. If he's not police, he's working for someone who wants a front row seat. Mrs. Bartlett? Maybe. But she looked honestly spooked this morning. I'd say whoever's watching me thinks we're close to something. He frowned, reached for the bell pull and gave it one short tug. Fritz appeared within seconds, discreet as smoke. Beer, Wolfe said. Then, as Fritz retreated, he added, Archie, the world teems with imbeciles who imagine that vigilance substitutes for wit. Let him watch. He will learn nothing of value. He might learn what kind of beer you drink, I said. Pfui. The beer arrived. Cold and golden, he drank half the glass before he spoke again. The inscription, for what's owed. That was Mrs. Bartlett's phrase. Word for word. That is the fulcrum. I figured you'd say that. You think it's literal? He wiped his mouth delicately. It is sentiment disguised as accounting. A man does not inscribe such words upon a creation of beauty unless he fears it will become a testament instead of a token. The question is, owed by whom and for what? Sounds like a riddle from a bad Sunday supplement. Your levity is misplaced, he said. Find the moral debt, and you find the thief. Before I could answer, the phone rang. I picked it up. It was Saul Panzer, the one man alive who could tail a ghost and file a report about it. Archie, he said, I've been keeping an eye on your hat friend. He's not freelance. He's on a short leash from someone named Ames. The lawyer? Yep. Victor Ames. Your follower met him outside the Bartlett apartment building 2 hours ago. They talked for 10 minutes, then the hat man went back to his station. Nice, I said. Wolfe will send you an orchid for that. Make it a check, he said, and hung up. I turned to Wolfe. Our watcher's working for the lawyer. That mean Mrs. Bartlett's watchdog came from inside the house. He set his glass down. It means Ames mistrusts his own client, or wishes to know more than she tells him. Both are plausible. You will visit him tomorrow. Tomorrow, I said. Why wait? Because, Wolfe said. Tonight you will call Mrs. Bartlett and inform her that the man shadowing you is not unknown to her counsel. Observe her tone. Surprise may prove honesty. I did as told. When she picked up, her voice sounded thin, like a wire stretched too tight. Mr. Goodwin? Yes, ma'am. Just letting you know your lawyer's got eyes on you. Or on me, depending how you count. A pause, then. Victor, she said softly. That doesn't make sense. That's what most lies sound like when you first hear them. Her breath caught. He's been urging me to stay quiet, to avoid police. Said he'd handle it privately. I thought... She stopped. I thought he was protecting me. Maybe he is, I said. Or maybe he's protecting himself. When I hung up, Wolfe had his eyes closed again, but I knew that didn't mean rest. His mind was sorting threads faster than I could knot them. He lied to her, he said finally. A lawyer who counsels silence when his client is threatened has interests beyond law. We will entertain Mr. Ames tomorrow at 11. I nodded. And tonight? You will dine, he said. Fritz has prepared veal with chestnut sauce. I must preserve the body if I intend to endure the mind's burdens." As he lifted his fork, I caught the faintest twitch of a smile. He was enjoying himself. The brownstone was disturbed, the air thick with intrigue, and Wolfe, who hated motion, was in his element without taking a single step. I knew that expression. Somewhere inside the fog of motives and pearls, he'd already smelled the shape of truth, and if Wolfe smelled truth, the rest of us would soon be choking on it. The next morning began with rain that looked determined to stay. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when Wolfe summoned me from the kitchen with a sound that might have been my name or just an impatient grunt. When I got to the office, he was already seated behind his desk, surrounded by the comforting stillness of the brownstone, the only battlefield he ever needed. "There will be a visitor at 11, he said, eyes on the morning paper. "Mr. Ames." "I know," I said. "You told him or he volunteered." "I instructed him. He did not protest. That is always suspicious." Fritz appeared silently to refresh Wolfe's coffee, which he took as the natural order of the universe. I took mine black, the way Wolfe calls barbaric, and waited for him to unspool whatever plan he'd already wound in his head. "Before he arrives," Wolfe said, "you will telephone Mrs. Bartlett again, confirm her location, ensure she has not left the apartment." I did as told. She answered on the third ring, her voice quieter than last night. "I'm here," she said. "Victor said he was coming to see you this morning." "He is," I said. "Mr. Wolfe's instructions are that you stay put until further notice." There was a pause long enough for me to hear the hum of tension through the line. "I will," she said. "But someone's been in the lobby all morning. The doorman says the man claims to be with a delivery service. He's asked twice if I'm expecting a parcel." "Lock the door," I said. "If it's anything edible, don't open it." When I hung up, Wolfe was watching me with that faint, disapproving curiosity that says he's 3 steps ahead and waiting for me to notice. "She's rattled," I told him. "Good," he said. "Rattled people betray their patterns." He leaned back. "You will observe Ames closely. When he lies, and he will, note which hand moves first." I'll be sure to applaud the right one. He ignored that, which meant I was in the clear until the doorbell rang precisely at 11. Victor Ames came in wearing the same court-approved composure he'd had before, though today it had a sheen of strain. He was holding a leather folder like it contained the 10 Commandments, or the evidence he hoped we wouldn't ask for. Wolfe didn't rise, naturally, and Ames didn't expect him to. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, nodding. "Good morning. I've brought the records you requested." He opened the folder and produced a stack of photographs, black and white shots of the plate of pearls, glittering in concentric perfection. Wolfe motioned for me to take them, spread them on the desk. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, and even in the flat images the pearls gleamed with that faint, ghostly light that seems too alive for something lifeless. Wolfe's eyes stayed on Ames. "And the insurance documents?" Ames hesitated. "They're in process. The company is preparing duplicates. I'll have them delivered by this afternoon." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "But you brought me these." He tapped the photographs. "Why?" Ames frowned slightly. "You requested them." "I requested the records, not mementos," Wolfe said. "Photographs are decoration unless attached to data. They serve only to remind us of what has been lost." Ames bristled. "They establish the object's existence and value. Surely that's pertinent." "Value, yes," Wolfe said, "but not truth. Truth has no ledger." He leaned forward a fraction, Wolfe's version of a shove. "You will tell me, Mr. Ames, why you advised your client to avoid the police." Ames blinked. "Because this could be resolved privately, without spectacle. Inez, Mrs. Bartlett, is a prominent figure in certain circles. Public investigation would invite gossip, insinuation, Pfui, Wolfe said softly. You are not her custodian. You feared the inquiry would expose your own negligence. Ames's fingers tightened on the folder. I beg your pardon. I rarely pardon stupidity, Wolfe said. You had access to the safe, to the photographs, and to her confidence. When the plate vanished, you should have summoned the authorities, not engaged surveillance. Ames tried to recover his footing. Surveillance? I don't know what you mean. Archie, Wolfe said without looking at me. Inform Mr. Ames that his hired observer is clumsy and that Mr. Panzer has already identified him. I watched the blood drain from Ames's face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then sighed. Very well, he said. Yes, I hired a man to keep an eye on her building. Not for suspicion, for safety. She's vulnerable. You saw the letters. Wolfe nodded once. Then why conceal it? Because she's fragile, Mr. Wolfe. I didn't want her to think she was being policed, and because... He trailed off, then smiled faintly. The kind of smile lawyers use when they've decided to gamble. Because I wasn't certain whom to trust. Including yourself, I asked. His smile didn't break. Especially myself. That earned him a grunt from Wolfe, which in this office ranks just below a standing ovation. Wolfe leaned back again. You may leave the folder. I will require copies of every correspondence between Mrs. Bartlett and the gallery. Letters, receipts, anything with signatures. Deliver them this evening. Ames hesitated. You believe the gallery is involved? I believe nothing, Wolfe said. I observe. Belief is the indulgence of the lazy. When Ames left, I shut the door, behind him, and turned. Wolfe's expression had softened into that peculiar calm that means something unpleasant has crystallized in his mind. Well, I asked. He lies competently, Wolfe said, but not completely. His anxiety was genuine, his purpose, not. He knows who took the plate, or why. He is shielding either guilt or affection. Affection for Mrs. Bartlett. Possibly, or for her money. He exhaled. There is an undercurrent of old obligation here. A debt unrecorded, perhaps paid in emotion. For what's owed. I nodded. So we're circling back to motive. He closed his eyes. Always. Motive is the spine of action. Without it, theft is only curiosity. Mr. Ames's vigilance and restraint suggest foreknowledge, and foreknowledge implies complicity. Then we squeeze him. Not yet. We observe. You will pay a visit to Miss Bartlett, Claudia, this afternoon. Any reason besides her sparkling personality? Because, Wolfe said, in every inheritance there is a thief by inclination. She may not have taken the plate, but she has certainly taken something. I stood, pocketing my notebook. If she offers tea, I'll consider that the confession. He almost smiled. Return before dinner. I expect a report worth the calories. As I headed out into the drizzle, I couldn't help thinking that if Wolfe was right, and he usually is, then the pearls weren't the only thing stolen. Somewhere among the Bartletts and their admirers was a debt unpaid, long before the theft began, and it was starting to collect interest. The rain had let up to a fine drizzle by the time I reached Claudia Bartlett's building in Murray Hill. It was the sort of residence that tries to pretend rent checks are vulgar. The lobby had more marble than warmth, and the doorman gave me the look reserved for people who don't belong, but might have an invitation anyway. When I told him my name and that I was expected, he called upstairs, listened a moment, and then nodded me toward the elevator with all the enthusiasm of a man handing over bad news. Claudia Bartlett answered the door herself, which surprised me. I'd expected a maid or a lapdog or both. She was in her late 20s, slim and sharp-featured, with the kind of beauty that seems permanently impatient. Her hair was clipped short, and her voice, when she said, "You're Mr. Goodwin," carried an edge like a polished knife. "That's right," I said. "From Nero Wolfe. I hope I'm not disturbing your afternoon." "You are," she said, "but come in anyway." The apartment was modern, expensive, and staged like a magazine spread. A few pieces of jewelry and sculpted glass gleamed on a sideboard, too deliberate to be casual. She offered me coffee, then changed her mind before I could answer and poured herself a drink instead. "I suppose you're here because of the plate," she said. "My stepmother must be frantic. She always is when she can't control something." "I hear you, and she don't get along." Claudia gave a small, amused laugh. "We never tried. My father married her when I was 16. She decided I was a problem to be managed, and I decided she was an interruption to be ignored. That's been our arrangement ever since." "That's tidy," I said. "But the plate? Did you ever see it?" "Of course. It's practically a family myth. Father made it before I was born, back when he still believed art could justify neglect. He called it his atonement piece." That pulled my attention. "Atonement for what?" "For being himself, I imagine." He didn't explain, and I didn't ask. Father's apologies were usually to his own conscience, not to people. She swirled her drink, watching me over the rim. "You think I took it, don't you? That I broke into my stepmother's apartment, opened a safe I've seen once, and left a cracked pearl as a calling card?" "I think somebody did, and you're on the list," I said. "But you've got the advantage. You knew where the safe was." Her expression flickered between irritation and amusement. "You're refreshingly direct. I suppose that's why Wolfe keeps you around, to say the things he can't be bothered to." "Among other services," I said. "Tell me, Miss Bartlett, what's your opinion of Victor Ames?" That hit home. She looked away, pretending to inspect a glass figurine. "He's my stepmother's lawyer, smooth, discreet, ambitious. She trusts him implicitly, which means he's probably dangerous." "Ever dangerous to you?" She hesitated, then smiled, a small, practiced thing that didn't reach her eyes. "He's charming when he wants to be. That's all I'll say." "That's enough," I said. "Did you know he hired someone to watch the building?" She turned sharply. "Watch her or me?" "That's the question." For a second, she looked genuinely unsettled, then masked it behind another sip. "If Victor's resorting to private surveillance, it means he's nervous. And Victor only gets nervous when money or reputation are involved." "Or both," I said. "Do you know anything about an inscription on the plate?" 3 words, for what's owed." Her fingers tightened around the glass. "I didn't know he inscribed it," she said quietly. "But that sounds like him. Father liked to moralize in precious metals. He believed every creation balanced a debt. That plate was supposed to be redemptive." "Redemptive how?" Her voice softened. "He'd been accused of something once, years before he met Inez. I don't know the details. Some dispute over sourcing the pearls for his first collection. People whispered about exploitation, unpaid labor in the East. He never talked about it, but I remember my mother, his first wife, saying the guilt followed him." "Sounds like someone else remembered it too," I said. Claudia met my eyes, and for once her poise slipped. "You think the letters are about that?" "Could be. Those who bled for them. That's what the first note said. If someone believed your father's atonement was fake, they might think the plate should be reclaimed." She went quiet. I gave her a minute and then asked, "Anyone you can think of who might hold a grudge that old?" She shook her head slowly. "Leo Parma idolized him. My mother's dead. Inez loved his legend more than the man. No one else from those days is still around, unless—" She stopped. "Unless what?" "There was a collector," she said finally. "A woman named Delora Kent. She and father were close once. Very close. When he refused to sell her the plate, she accused him of cheating her out of a commission. She threatened to ruin him. Inez won't talk about her, but I know Delora still sends cards every year on the anniversary of his death. They're unsigned, but they're hers." "That's devotion or obsession," I said. "Depending on the postage." Claudia managed a small smile. You really think all this fuss is over a plate of pearls? It's never about the thing, I said. It's about what the thing means. I thanked her for the time, left my card, and promised not to publish her life story before lunch. She walked me to the door and hesitated there, her voice low. Mr. Goodwin, if you find out Inez has been lying, I want to know. She's been living off my father's reputation for years. Maybe this time it's catching up to her. Back in the street, the drizzle had thickened again. I started toward the corner for a cab, but halfway there I caught sight of a familiar shape under a doorway. Same hat, same posture, same patience. Ames's watcher hadn't taken the day off. I stopped, turned just enough for him to see me see him, and smiled. He didn't move, but I could tell the message landed. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was where he always is, behind his desk, half buried in the serenity of his own logic. I gave him the rundown, every word, every look. He listened without a single interruption, then exhaled as if my report had confirmed a private suspicion. Good, he said. It aligns. Aligns with what? I asked. He opened his eyes. With the debt. The inscription was no metaphor. The plate was payment, and someone has decided the account remains unsettled. He reached for his beer, eyes narrowing. Archie, arrange for Mr. Panzer to locate this Miss Kent. I suspect the next pearl to crack will not be a gem. Saul Panzer called a little before 9 that night. Wolfe and I were in the office. Wolfe was pretending to read Pliny, and I was pretending not to watch him pretend. When the phone rang, I caught it before Fritz could appear. She's real, Saul said. Delora Kent. Lives in Boston, Beacon Hill address, old money, older grudges. I made a few calls. She's been a minor legend among collectors since the 50s. Specializes in antique jewelry and anything with pearls. She did commission Douglas Bartlett once, about 20 years ago. I looked over at Wolfe, who had turned one page but hadn't read a word. And? She says he cheated her. Claims he used pearls she supplied for another design, then moralized them into a plate. Her words. She's still bitter. I also found out she's been in New York this week. Checked into the Latham on Monday. Checked out this morning. Destination unknown. Any chance she's the one who took the plate? She's 82 and walks with a cane. If she took it, she had help. Or a really good chiropractor, I said. All right, thanks, Saul. Keep digging on who helped her. Any assistants, couriers, or admirers with 2 working legs. When I hung up, Wolfe was watching me with that patient irritation of his, the kind that says the conversation has been going on inside his head long before I entered it. She is a revenant, he said, a relic animated by grievance. Her body is irrelevant. Her mind, however, is active enough to orchestrate a gesture. You think she's behind the notes? I think she's behind everything, Wolfe said. A woman who believes beauty was stolen from her will steal it back, if only to destroy it. That's poetic, I said. But the question is, how does she pull it off from Boston? By proxy, he said. A local intermediary. Perhaps one with access and motive. Mr. Ames fits, as does Miss Ross. Both move in the necessary circles. Maybe, but Ames doesn't strike me as the sentimental type. No, Wolfe said, but he is a lawyer, and lawyers are excellent instruments for executing another's will, sometimes literally. Before I could answer, the phone rang again. This time it was Mrs. Bartlett. Her voice was sharp and frightened. Mr. Goodwin, I'm sorry to call so late, but something's happened. I straightened. What kind of something? There was another note, she said. It was slipped under my door sometime this evening. My maid found it just now. Read it, I said. Her voice trembled slightly. It says, the debt remains. You display what you do not deserve. That's all. It's on the same paper, same typewriter. I glanced at Wolfe, who had closed his eyes but was clearly listening. Anyone seen near your apartment? I asked. No one unusual. The doorman said a messenger came earlier, but he left nothing. I don't know what to do. Do nothing, I told her. Lock your doors, keep the lights on, and wait. Mr. Wolfe will decide what's next. When I hung up, Wolfe opened his eyes. She is the axis. Everything revolves around her, though not as she believes. The thief does not covet the plate. It was never about possession. It is about humiliation. You think this is payback for what her husband did? Not merely that, Wolfe said. It is a reenactment. Whoever took the plate wishes to reverse the transaction, to make Inez Bartlett the debtor instead of the creditor. That inscription, for what's owed, has been turned against her. I stood. Then we're out of words and into movement. I'll head to her place, check the situation. Take care, Wolfe said quietly, which coming from him was equivalent to a hug and a hymn. The cab ride uptown was short and wet. When I reached her building, the doorman looked jittery. Mrs. Bartlett asked if you were coming, he said. She's upstairs. Oh, and a lady was here earlier asking for her. Said she was from the gallery. I felt a cold knot form. Name. She didn't give one. Tall, dark coat. Professional type. Left about half an hour ago. That fit Vivian Ross like a tailored glove. I took the elevator up and knocked once before Mrs. Bartlett opened the door. Her hair was slightly disheveled, eyes wide. On the hall table sat an envelope, identical to the previous one. I didn't touch it, she said. I picked it up with my handkerchief. The type was the same, but this time there was something extra. A small, cracked pearl glued to the paper beside the message. It gleamed like an accusation. When did the woman from the gallery leave? I asked. About 30 minutes ago. She brought a paper for me to sign. A postponement notice for the exhibit. She said Victor Ames authorized it. I stared at her. Did you sign it? No, I didn't trust her. She seemed nervous. I pocketed the letter carefully. Good. Stay here and keep the door locked. I'll be in touch. As I turned to leave, the phone rang. She jumped, but I picked it up. The man's voice came through, low and deliberate. Mrs. Bartlett. This is Goodwin, I said. Who's calling? The line went silent, then clicked dead. I didn't like any of it. Downstairs, I asked the doorman if he'd noticed what car the gallery woman used. He hadn't, but one of the porters had seen her get into a cab heading west. That was enough. I called the brownstone from the lobby phone. Wolfe, he said, as if I'd woken him from meditation instead of thought. She's rattled. Another note and a cracked pearl attached. Vivian Ross was there before I arrived, claiming to represent Ames. She's moving fast. Of course, Wolfe said. The gallery woman is the executor of Miss Kent's sentiment. She is staging a performance for an audience of one. The question is whether she intends Mrs. Bartlett to survive the final act. I didn't like the sound of that. You think she's planning something tonight? Possibly, Wolfe said. Return at once. Bring the note. I must examine the adhesive used to affix the pearl. It will tell us who she serves. Who she serves. Yes, Wolfe said calmly. The dead, Mr. Goodwin, always the dead. I hung up and stepped outside into the rain, hailing the first cab that passed. As we pulled away, I glanced back at the building. The doorman was still at his post, but behind one of the upper windows, a shadow moved against the light. Someone was watching the street, waiting for me to leave. For the first time since this thing began, I felt it. The chill that comes when the pieces start locking into place, and you realize one of them is human. When I got back to the brownstone, the rain had turned into a fine mist that clung to my coat like bad news. Wolfe was in his chair, half buried behind the desk, eyes closed and fingertips pressed together. The only sign he wasn't asleep was that Fritz had placed his untouched beer within arm's reach instead of whisking it away. I set the new note on the blotter and gave him the short version. Vivian's visit, the unsigned postponement, the pearl glued to the message, and the mystery caller who'd hung up after one word. Wolfe listened without opening his eyes, the way a judge listens to an appeal he's already decided to deny. When I finished, he said, "The adhesive, Archie." I handed it over with my handkerchief. He leaned forward, sniffed once, and grunted. Acrylic resin. Industrial, not household. Common in gallery restoration work. Miss Ross uses it daily. That's what I thought, I said. But it doesn't explain the theatrics. Why she'd risk sneaking into Mrs. Bartlett's building for another note when she's already spooked. Because, Wolfe said, she's not done proving her virtue. Such people never are. He looked at the pearl, then at me. Fetch the first note and the cracked gem she brought. I will require comparison. I went to the safe and brought the earlier evidence out. Wolfe turned both pearls over with a pen blade, examining the edges under his magnifier. Identical fracture pattern, he said finally. The same implement broke both. The crack is not incidental. It is deliberate, ritualized. Someone is declaring restitution, not revenge. That's philosophy, I said. I'm more interested in who's doing the declaring. You will be, he said, before the night is over. At that exact moment, the phone rang again. I picked it up, and before I could say anything, a voice came through. A woman's, low, measured, but trembling slightly, under control. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "this is Vivian Ross." "Well," I said, "speak of the adhesive. We were just discussing you." "I don't have time for jokes. I need to see Mr. Wolfe immediately. It's important." "He's listening," I said, glancing at Wolfe. His eyebrow lifted, which I took as consent. "Go ahead." "There's something you have to know," she said. "About the plate and about Mrs. Bartlett. She isn't who she says she is." That got both of us upright a little. "Where are you?" I asked. "At the gallery. Please, come now. I don't want to say this over the phone." "Hold tight," I said. "I'm on my way." Wolfe opened his mouth, but I beat him to it. "Yes, I know," I said. "Don't die. Don't get shot. Don't let her feed me poisoned tea. I'll be careful." "Your insolence is tedious," he muttered. "Take Saul. Call him now." By the time Saul and I reached the gallery, it was 10:30 and the place was dark, except for a narrow strip of light leaking under the office door. The main floor smelled of polish and old carpet. I told Saul to wait by the entrance and walked down the corridor. "Miss Ross?" I called softly. No answer. I pushed the door open. The light came from a single desk lamp, its shade tilted sideways. Papers were scattered across the floor like fallen birds. Behind the desk, Vivian Ross was slumped over, her head turned away. She wasn't asleep. I checked for a pulse I knew I wouldn't find. She'd been struck once, cleanly, probably with the heavy brass paperweight that now lay dented on the carpet. The rest of the scene looked staged. The toppled chair, the open drawer, the envelope half slid from her hand. Saul came running when he heard me move. He took one look and swore under his breath. "She's gone?" "Yeah," I said. "And she called me 20 minutes ago to come hear a confession." I crouched and pulled the envelope from her hand. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed on the same machine as the earlier notes. But this one was addressed. "Inez took what was not hers. She will lose what remains." There was no signature, but a faint fingerprint smudge in gray adhesive told me all I needed to know. "Saul," I said, "get a cab. We're going back to Mrs. Bartlett's now." We reached her building just before 11. The doorman was gone, probably on a smoke break or told to disappear. The lobby lights were dimmed and the elevator took its time. When I stepped out on her floor, the door to her apartment was ajar. "Wait here," I told Saul, and pushed it open. The lights were on. The place looked wrong, not ransacked, just disturbed. A chair overturned, a vase cracked, a faint perfume in the air that wasn't hers. I moved down the hall toward the bedroom. "Inez," I called. No answer. But on the bed, in a neat circle, lay something that stopped me cold. A dozen pearls arranged in a ring, gleaming against the white spread. In the center was a single typed note. Debt paid. Saul appeared in the doorway, gun drawn, eyes scanning the room. "She's gone," he said. "Yeah," I said. "And the watcher outside?" "Nowhere." I picked up the note, stared at it, and tried not to think of the word Wolfe had used. Restitution. Whatever game this was, someone had just declared it finished. Back at the brownstone, I laid everything out on Wolfe's desk. The note from the bed, the one from Vivian's hand, and the cracked pearls from before. Wolfe listened as I described every detail. He didn't interrupt, but his breathing deepened the way it does when he's fitting the last few stones into an arch only he can see. When I finished, he said, "Mrs. Bartlett is not dead." That made me sit down. "She's vanished, Wolfe." "Precisely. She has vanished because she intended to. Miss Ross's death was not murder by her hand, but the termination of a partnership. Mrs. Bartlett hired her, through Mr. Ames, to stage the letters, the pearls, the theft itself, an elaborate illusion designed to resuscitate her late husband's fame and her own relevance. That's a lot of theater for a comeback." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "But Miss Ross, discovering the deception's true purpose, perhaps blackmail, perhaps fraud, sought to expose her, hence the call to you." Mrs. Bartlett silenced her, then fled. The phrase, "debt paid," is her epitaph for complicity. I rubbed my forehead. "So where does Ames fit?" "He facilitated it," Wolfe said. "But his conscience is brittle. He will return shortly, to confess or to beg. When he does, we shall have our finale." Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed, his voice low and certain. "The debt was never about pearls, Archie. It was about vanity, the only currency some souls can't stop spending." And as if to prove him right, the doorbell rang. I went to the door, half expecting the police, but it was Victor Ames. His collar was turned up against the drizzle, and his face looked like it had been pressed through a wringer. When I told him to come in, he didn't bother taking off his coat. He just stood in the hall, dripping guilt on the parquet. Wolfe's voice carried from the office. "Bring him in, Archie." Ames hesitated at the threshold, as if he'd just realized this was the last room where his nerves would survive unexamined. Wolfe didn't rise. He never does. But his eyes lifted, weighing the man as one might weigh a specimen before dissection. "Mr. Ames," he said, "you were expected." Ames swallowed. "I heard about Vivian Ross. It's all over the radio. They said it looked like a burglary." Wolfe's lip twitched. "The police love convenient nouns." "Sit down." Ames did, folding himself into the chair as though it might collapse. I took my usual spot, notebook in hand, but not writing yet. "Mr. Ames," Wolfe began, "you are a man of law, yet you have helped subvert it. Let us not insult each other with denial." Ames's mouth opened, then closed. "I don't know what you mean." "You know precisely what I mean," Wolfe said. "You facilitated the theft of the Bartlett plate and the subsequent charade. Letters, threats, and all. Your motive was practical. Mrs. Bartlett's was pathological. She wished to cleanse her late husband's name and, incidentally, her own by fabricating a theft and its resolution. You were to negotiate the recovery, pocket your share, and bask in her gratitude." "That's absurd," Ames said, but the protest came out strangled. "Absurdity," Wolfe said, "does not preclude truth. Vivian Ross was the operative. Her expertise in restoration gave her both access to materials and credibility. She composed the threats, staged the disappearance, and intended to deliver the plate recovered for a fee. But then she discovered something inconvenient. The plate she hid was not the original. Ames's head jerked up. What? Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Ah, you did not know that. For a long second, the room was quiet, except for the rain against the windows. Ames looked smaller by the minute. What are you saying? I'm saying, Wolfe went on, that Mrs. Bartlett never trusted her collaborators. The plate she claimed stolen was a replica, crafted years ago by Leo Palmer at her request. She kept the original hidden, anticipating betrayal. When Miss Ross discovered the deception, she threatened exposure. Mrs. Bartlett silenced her and fled with the genuine artifact. Ames stared at him, stunned. She killed Vivian. No, that's impossible. Not impossible, Wolfe said, merely unoriginal. Her debt-paid note was her attempt to frame the narrative, to close the circle she began. She wished to end as the tragic widow, not the exposed fraud. Ames pressed his hands over his face. Dear God, he whispered. She said she wanted to restore Douglas's reputation. That was all. Reputation, Wolfe murmured, is a narcotic, Mr. Ames. She overdosed. I leaned forward. Where would she go, Wolfe? She's not the type to hop a train without luggage. She will go where she believes herself untouchable, Wolfe said, to the one place that still reveres her husband's genius, his old workshop. Mr. Palmer's. I was already reaching for the phone. I'll get Saul. Wolfe stopped me with a raised hand. No, the police will be faster, but I shall not call them until the stage is set. He turned to Ames. You will accompany Mr. Goodwin. You owe Mrs. Bartlett, if not justice, at least the decency of witness. Ames looked as if I'd invited him to his own autopsy, but he nodded. I'll go. It took us 15 minutes to reach Palmer's shop on 47th. The street was half deserted, the drizzle thickening again. The display window was dark, but a faint glow leaked through a crack in the curtain. Ames hung back as I tried the door. It was locked. I knocked twice, hard. A voice inside snapped, "We're closed." "Mr. Palmer," I called. "It's Goodwin." There was a pause, then the lock turned reluctantly. Palmer's face appeared, pale and tense. "What do you want?" "Mrs. Bartlett," I said. "She's here." He started to deny it, then sagged. "She's in the back," he muttered. "She said she needed to think. I didn't ask questions." Ames pushed past him, but I caught his arm. "Easy," I said. "We do this calm." We followed Palmer to the workroom. It was cluttered as before. Tools, magnifiers, half-finished pieces glinting under the lamps. And there, at the central table, stood Mrs. Bartlett. Her mink coat hung open, her hands resting on a shallow golden plate that shimmered with concentric rings of pearls. The real one. She looked up when we entered. "Archie," she said softly, almost welcoming. "You've come for the confession." Ames took a step forward. "Inez, what have you done?" "What was necessary," she said. "Vivian betrayed me. She thought she could hold me hostage for what wasn't hers. She didn't understand. Douglas's work was never theft. It was redemption." Her voice cracked on the last word. I moved closer, slowly. Redemption doesn't usually involve corpses. "She wouldn't stop," she said, staring down at the plate. "She said I was a liar, that Douglas stole from her friend, from Delora Kent. Lies. He paid them all." Ames tried again. "Inez, please, give me the plate. We'll go to the police." She smiled faintly. "You still think there's law for this?" Then, before I could move, she lifted the plate, holding it at arm's length as if weighing its worth one last time. The room froze. For a heartbeat, I thought she might hand it over. Instead, she flung it against the stone floor. It shattered in a rain of pearls. Ames gasped. Palmer swore. I just stood there, watching the last echo fade. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, thanks to Wolfe's quiet call, they found Mrs. Bartlett sitting calmly amid the wreckage, her hands folded, eyes distant. "The debt's paid," she murmured once as they led her out. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was after midnight. Wolfe was still awake, his chair tilted, his eyes half closed but alert. "She broke it," I said. He nodded. "Of course. It was the only absolution left to her. She's under arrest." "As she should be." He lifted his glass, regarding the amber swirl within. "Pearls, Archie, are born of irritation, imperfections encased until they gleam. Inez Bartlett mistook corruption for grace. She tried to polish guilt into beauty." He drank, set the glass down, and sighed. "Futile. Always futile." Fritz appeared with the late tray. Wolfe took one look and said, "Beef consommé. Sufficient." I leaned against the door frame, watching him. "So ends the plate of pearls." "Ends," Wolfe said. "No, it simply returns to the sea." He closed his eyes then, and that was the last word on it. The next morning came grey and clean, the kind of day New York gives you after a night of breaking things. Quiet, washed, pretending innocence. I was in the office early, mostly because sleep hadn't bothered to stay the night. Fritz was in the kitchen producing coffee strong enough to floor a mule, and Wolfe was upstairs with his orchids, which meant the house was running on its usual schedule again. That alone was evidence of civilization. At 11, he came down. The orchids had evidently behaved because he was calm, composed, and carrying that faint scent of satisfaction that clings to him whenever the world has proved his deductions correct. He settled into his chair, rang for Fritz, and sipped his beer in silence while I read him the morning paper. They'd filled half a column with the Bartlett story. Socialite arrested in art theft ruse. It had all the usual seasoning, tragedy, deception, and a few adjectives too purple for breakfast. I summarized aloud, skipping the sentimental flourishes. Mrs. Inez Bartlett, widow of famed jeweler Douglas Bartlett, was taken into custody late last night after a bizarre sequence of events involving the disappearance and destruction of a celebrated artwork known as the Plate of Pearls. Police sources indicate Mrs. Bartlett confessed partial responsibility for the death of art curator Vivian Ross, found slain in her East 57th Street office. The incident is under further investigation. I folded the paper. They left out that the widow wasn't planning to kill her, only to shut her up. I suppose that doesn't sell as well. Wolfe grunted. Facts rarely do. Saul says the cops found the replica plate where you said they would, in Ames's office safe. Ames, meanwhile, is talking like a man who's just discovered he has a conscience. He's admitted everything short of tying the noose himself. That is expected, Wolfe said. His morality required a public audience. I leaned back. You know, I almost feel sorry for her. She didn't want money, didn't even want to get away with it. She just wanted to be believed. Wolfe's mouth twitched. Pity, Archie, is the indulgence of those too lazy to understand. Mrs. Bartlett wished to rewrite memory. When the past refused to cooperate, she attempted to destroy it. That is not tragedy. It is vanity. He closed his eyes a moment, then opened them again with that quiet gleam that means the case has already been dissected and filed away under human folly. She was clever, he went on. Her choice to commission a replica years earlier gave her the means. Her circle of admirers supplied the accomplices. Miss Ross's ambition made her malleable. Mr. Ames's discretion made him useful, and Leo Palmer's devotion blinded him. They all played their parts in her morality play, but she underestimated the simplest truth. Deceit requires an audience. Once she had convinced everyone, she could no longer convince herself. That's poetic, I said. But you have to admit, it was a good act. All that talk about redemption and legacy. She even had me halfway convinced she was the victim. She was, Wolfe said, but not of theft, of belief. She worshipped her husband's art as a relic, not realizing that worship and possession are opposites. He drained his glass. When she smashed the plate, she did what her husband should have done 20 years ago. She acknowledged that no object, however beautiful, can ransom a soul. I let that hang there a minute, because it deserved to. Outside, a cab honked twice. Inside, Fritz's footsteps moved quietly in the hall. The brownstone had returned to its usual rhythm, as though beauty and blood had never shared the same sentence. "What about Delora Kent?" I asked finally. "She's still out there, probably reading the news with a martini and a sense of cosmic justice. She will read, preen, and resume collecting," Wolfe said. "Age does not absolve obsession. It merely dresses it in nostalgia." I smiled. "And you, what will you collect today?" He eyed me. "Patience. You will file the correspondence and ensure that the police return the fragments of the plate here before they are lost in bureaucratic confusion. I intend to examine the fracture lines." "Souvenir hunting?" "Research," he said firmly. "The destruction of beauty, Archie, is never complete. Fragments teach more than wholes." I left him to it and went to make the call to Inspector Kramer, who was already tired of hearing the word pearls. When I came back, Wolfe had arranged 3 small pieces of the plate on a velvet cloth. They caught the light faintly, even in ruin. He looked at them a long time, then said, almost to himself, "A man creates perfection to atone for imperfection. A woman preserves it to deny loss. Both are futile." He turned the largest shard between his fingers, studying the gleam where gold met pearl. "Still," he said softly, "it was exquisite." I didn't argue. Some things you don't answer. Fritz brought lunch, veal ragout and fresh bread, and the smell of it reminded me that civilization, for all its cracked pearls and vanished widows, still had its consolations. As we ate, Wolfe said, "Archie, what have we learned? That art's bad for your health? Pooey. We have learned that truth, like craftsmanship, cannot be faked indefinitely. A flaw concealed is not a flaw erased. Remember that." "Fine," I said, "but if anyone brings us another symbolic masterpiece, I'm charging hazard pay." He made a sound halfway between a sigh and a chuckle. "You will do as instructed. And now, silence. Fritz, more bread." I looked at him, the big man in his chair, serene again, the world safely distant outside those walls, and thought how every case ends the same way, the mess cleaned up, the brownstone restored to its unnatural peace, and Wolfe back in command of his kingdom of reason. The world had cracked another pearl, but he'd found the pattern in it. And me, I was just the guy who kept count. That's how it always ends. Dinner served, conscience quieted, and Nero Wolfe reminding us both that beauty, like justice, rarely survives intact, but it's worth chasing anyway.